With the upsets and the shakeups, there's going to be a new top four. I wonder what your top four is.
Mine will definitely be different than committee. I can guarantee you that. Number 4, I actually had LSU there last year. I'm going to bump in Bama in that 4 spot. I would have them higher if they were undefeated. I just can't get past the Ole Miss loss. There has to be a penalty for losing. That's mine, is keeping them at 4. Number 3, I have Baylor. Even without Seth Russell, with Jarrett Stidham, they still were a monster, offensive performance against Kansas State. I do have big concerns about their defense, which I think could be an issue this weekend against Oklahoma. Clemson, to me, another team that I think could be that number 1 spot. They're playing as good as anybody. We saw them finally get over that Florida State hump. And then the Ohio State Buckeyes, the defending national champs for me. I know it wasn't pretty against Minnesota, but they won. That's the bottom line. Should be rewarded for that. But, Matt, here's the kicker.
Okay.
When the committee comes out on Tuesday, I think there's a chance they could have Alabama number 1.
I do too.
Clemson.
Say Oklahoma does win out, and that's obviously a pretty impressive schedule. So they still have that 1 loss to Texas. But considering that resume, I would say it's safe to say that Oklahoma may be very much in that college football playoff. Chris, is there another 1-loss Big 12 team? Rajler, let me say this. Is there another team in the Big 12 who can afford 1 loss and still make the playoff?
I don't think so, Kerry. I think it's going to be very difficult. Now, you do have the situation where they're going to all play each other now, but because Oklahoma's loss came earlier and they get a chance to end the season with all these teams and really add some pop to their resume with these teams, I think they're the best. Here's the other reason. I think if Notre Dame stays number 1, stays with just 1 loss, Kerry, and Notre Dame, and you've got, say, Oklahoma and Notre Dame both there with 1 loss at the end of the season, because Notre Dame's loss would have been to potentially number 1 Clemson in a driving range storm when they went for 2, I think Notre Dame probably looks a little bit better in that scenario. So, yeah, I think Oklahoma, Sharon, is the best chance of a 1-loss team in the Big 12 to get in.
Yeah, I agree they're the best chance. Whether the other 3 can get in, I mean, we've heard the committee say time and time again, strength of schedule matters. And those other 3 teams, they just don't have the schedule of Oklahoma. Projecting their schedule forward on December 6th, where it will rank, Oklahoma State's schedule is projected to rank 37th, TCU's 40th, Baylor's 58th. And Notre Dame, Stanford, other 1-loss teams, they're in the top 20. But that being said, that's projecting that every team that we think is going to make the playoff is actually going to win out and make it. Right. We've seen time and time again, the end of the season, crazy things happen. I guarantee one of the teams that we think is a lock for a playoff will lose at least 1 more time.
I like that guarantee right there. Is TCU pretty much completely done?
I don't think they're completely done. I think more I look at the way they're playing and defensively. And I said this a few weeks ago. I just didn't think they could hold up. You can't win every game 50-40. You just can't do it. And sooner or later that was going to get them, and it got them in this game. I think there's another one out there where they just can't hold a team down, and I think that's ultimately what gets the Horned Frogs.
It'll be interesting to see if the Big 12 kind of, because they're so deep this year at the top, if they cannibalize themselves, much like how the SEC has done for so many years. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Drive Thru. Sharon Katz, Chris Lowe, I'm Kerry Chow. We'll see you next time.
We've known each other long enough. I'm asking you to be totally honest with me right here. First question about Jarrett Stidham, okay? Did he surprise you just at least a little bit about how well he played in Manhattan last week against Kansas State?
And plus I would never pull your leg, Scott. But, first and foremost, I mean, quite honestly, no. And I know it sounds crazy, but, when you're around a guy for 11 months, you watch him, you live with him, you understand him. You understand his instincts, his awareness, and his competitive nature, and plus his ability to do what he feels like he's capable of doing, then no, it wasn't a surprise to us. Really exactly what we figured would happen.
Well, and that's great to hear and to see him. He looks just like anybody that you plug in your system. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that you seem to prepare your offense. Look, you guys scored in 2 minutes. And it was like if there were any nerves, it seemed like that would have put him right to bed. But he seems like he was built for this. Where's that come from?
First of all, I think it comes from him, and our guys believe in our system. You talked about the system, and we got good players. We got really good people that do things at a high rate of speed with a lot of confidence. And Stidham just, I mentioned it before, I think he's just got an old soul. He's a guy that is well beyond his years, experience-wise, awareness-wise, and everything that it takes to be a great quarterback. And, he just stepped in there and played like he's been practicing for 11 months.
You have had more physically imposing wide receivers than Corey Coleman, but he's got 58 catches, Coach, and 20 of them have ended with the fight song in the end zone. What makes him such a problem?
he's just a bad dude, man. I mean, that guy's tough now. He'll pull your heart out and watch it stop beating. He is a bad hombre, and he's a guy that really has a great competitive spirit, has a lot of confidence, and he's just a person that doesn't want to be denied. He's a great role model for our team, because he's got a lot of spirit, a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and a lot of just I'm going to get after you and not going to be denied. So he's got everything to go along with being extremely talented, extremely gifted, physically, and just put that mentality with it, you got the best guy around.
So much, Art, in your league is backloaded, and a lot's made of that because you play your toughest games in the last month of November. Looking at this schedule coming up, you got OU, then Oak State, TCU, and then Texas is just waiting there to screw up a season if they can at the last game of the year. So how do you get your guys to play their absolute best when the most important time of the year comes around?
It's that age-old cliche. I mean, you just do it one day at a time, one game at a time. We're not looking at the big picture. We're on the small picture, and the small picture is be better tomorrow than we were today and try to get a win this Saturday, and everything else will take care of itself. So our guys are very mature. We got a mature football team. We got a bunch of old guys on the team that have won a lot of football games, won a couple of championships over the last couple of years. So they know what they're doing. They know how to excel when it's excel time, and it's that time right now.
I believe what you're saying, but I also know what happened to you guys in TCU last year. I can't help but wonder how much you don't feel like you have to look at the biggest picture of all and think, do we have to campaign? What do we need to do? And I suppose winning takes care of all that. But to that point, Art, how much do you have to do? I mean, I appreciate you coming on with me, but I just wonder how much of the job that becomes now.
I just, really, Scott, and you mentioned it, with our backloaded schedule, all we got to do is just do what we do. If we'll keep winning, this deuce that I got on the table here, it'll turn into a queen here in a couple, 3 weeks. And we keep winning, and it'll turn into an ace, and then, I'll pitch it out there and play it because it's going to win all the hands. So we're in good shape. We just got to take care of our business on the field. Everything else take care of itself.
Coach, how ready is your freshman quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, to handle this stretch run?
Oh, I'll tell you what we're doing around here, Niche. We're not using the F word. We're not calling him that. He's got an old soul, and he is ready. And really that's the way that we talk about him. We talk about him as being a ready QB, because he's done his work, he's done his time, and now he's ready to roll. So, yeah, he's in good shape. And the thing that helps him, is that we got a really good football team around him on offense and defense and special teams, and we'll be playing right here on the Brazos River. So he's got some things working for him.
Coach, we know what RG3 winning a Heisman meant for your program. What does it mean now to have another guy in the conversation like Corey Coleman?
It's big time. You only got 3 or 4 of those guys mentioned across the nation, and ours is one of them. And Corey is very deserving. He is a dynamic player that, has really been good the last couple of years, made a bunch of plays for us, and he's one of the reasons that we're, having some of the success that we're having. So we're jacked, and we just gotta hope that he stays as productive as he's been through the early part of the season, finishes strong, and we'll see what happens in New York.
Coach, I know you were outspoken after the way things worked out with the playoff committee last year. What did you make of where Baylor was placed in the initial college football playoff rankings?
I wasn't surprised, quite honestly. We just, what they say about you take your lumps, you move on. We took a few lumps. We've been the odd man out, knocking on the door at number 5. So, hey, we're just going to keep playing. We're going to keep balling. We're going to keep trying to build that resume, and we understand that, if we slip, then, it's on us. So we just got to do what we can do and try to finish this thing out and see what happens.
I think Oklahoma might be the best team in the Big 12. They had that ugly loss to Texas, which is, Paul, I might have to explain this to you, why I don't have them in my top 4. They have that loss, and you cannot reward a team with a loss. But I think they could make a huge step on the road winning against Baylor. I think this is going to be a big problem for Baylor, especially if you go back and watch the Thursday night game against Kansas State. They really struggled to get off the field versus the run, and I think Oklahoma could have a field day running some IJP run against Baylor's defense.
Yeah, I still remember Oklahoma trailing by 2 touchdowns in Knoxville a couple of months ago. I was tempted to go with Oklahoma State, but I'm sticking with the Baylor Bears. I'll go down with the ship, but I still think they're the best team in the Big 12, and I believe they'll show that Saturday night, Danny.
We begin with the Heisman Trophy race. Leonard Fournette, after struggling with Alabama, Chris, has opened the door a little bit in this Heisman race. Who made the biggest ground last weekend?
I think it's the guy on the other side of the ball Saturday night. Derrick Henry had a terrific football game. Here's a guy who carried it 38 times, 210 yards carry. I thought he was on the periphery in the Heisman race before that game, but as you know, winning the Heisman is all about delivering on big stages. That was a big stage Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. On the other side of the field is Leonard Fournette, the runaway favorite going into that game. He gets 31 yards. Henry gets 210. Now, how does Henry finish the season? Does he continue to perform like that? You know Alabama's going to feed him the football. That's what they do, okay? If he continues to roll it up, Alabama wins out. I think he's certainly a guy who will be in New York City.
Yeah, Henry with 14 straight games with a touchdown. That ties Tim Tebow for an SEC record. You mentioned what happened with Leonard Fournette. He's not out of it because of that performance?
No way. And nor should he be. I think if you polled every coach in the country right now, they'd tell you that Leonard Fournette is still the best player in college football. I don't know if anybody would have dented that Alabama defense. I think you bring Jim Brown back.
Maybe Jim Brown.
Well, maybe at his age right now, but listen. He had 4 guys on top of him when he got the football. I don't think that's a reflection of Leonard Fournette. The LSU's offensive line got their butts kicked. Is what it boils down to. But no, I think Fournette is right there in the middle of it. You're talking about a guy who had 150 yards in every game before that game. So it's the body of work. I think if he continues to play well the rest of the way, then he's going to be right there in the middle of the conversation as well.
That's running backs here. What about wide receiver Corey Coleman out of Baylor? Because we talked about he's on pace. He's got 20 touchdowns already. The FBS record is 27 for a season by Troy Edwards. We're only in week 11. Corey Coleman's a beast. Is he not getting enough love?
I love Corey Coleman as a player. I mean, he is a guy that's so explosive. You know what I like the best about him, Kerry, is he plays the position like a linebacker. I mean, you talk about a guy who will block, who runs routes, who fights for every pass. I'll tell you who he is. He's Steve Smith, but faster. He's a faster player than Steve Smith. That's the way he competes. You're right, 20 touchdowns already. That's a career for most guys. They're going to keep throwing to him. He's going to keep getting targeted. I think he's a guy who's going to have 30 touchdowns. If he's got 30 touchdowns this year, give or take, Baylor keeps winning, and they're in the national championship conversation, I think Corey Coleman's got to be in that mix, and he already is in that mix, if you ask me.
If he has 30 touchdowns, forget about in the mix. Does he win it?
I think he's got a great chance, especially with Fournette having that bad game. If Fournette continued to roll it up, I think it would be hard for anybody to win it. But this is a year that a receiver, remember this too, there's not a marquee quarterback. Boykin had a bad game last week. Again, I don't think he's completely out of it, but this has been a quarterback's award now for the last few years. But there's not one of those guys, Kerry, this year. They're at the top. I think that opens it up even further for a guy like Coleman, who is a receiver on a team that throws the football a ton, to potentially win it. But yeah, if he gets 30 touchdowns, Baylor's right there in the national championship mix. I think he's got a great chance to win it.
According to Las Vegas, Leonard Fournette still has the best odds of winning the Heisman, followed by Derrick Henry and then Corey Coleman.